Yeah! Let's go! Hot takes fly, better brace for the blast. Welcome to that chapter. Let's go!
Welcome to Chapped A Podcast, a face for radio. Coming at you from the stock, Woodstock, Georgia, 5 foot 10 inches above sea level. Shouting it out and rocking it out, baby. Welcome. Today we have a special guest in the house, Coach Jason Borcherding, and we're excited to have him. He's a Etowah Baseball coach and the father of a top-rated catcher in the country right now, Coach, a junior commit from Clemson, Georgia. Welcome to the show, Coach.
Thank you very much.
So glad to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So as we get started today, Coach, we want to hear a lot of stuff. I'm excited about this. I know we've talked about this pre-production, but want to hear about your journey, personal journeys.
Yep.
Want to hear about your journey with your son.
Yes, sir.
With coaching.
Yep.
With the eventual state championship game coming up.
Yes, sir.
As you've advanced again, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Taking on a region rival with North Paulding.
It's pretty impressive. Yes, sir.
At Coolray Field,
Yep.
where the Braves play AAA baseball.
Yep.
That's amazing. But so, yeah, let's cover your journey. Let's cover what you've done as a coach, a father, a dad, a teacher, a mentor, an advisor, an attorney, an agent, all the things, all the hats you wear.
Do a little bit of everything. Yes, sir.
Absolutely. And you do it well.
Oh, thank you.
And so then we'll cover the some NIL stuff.
Yep.
We'll cover the marketing stuff of the athletes and the social media of the athletes. And we're just excited to hear the journey, Coach. So
appreciate it.
Yes, sir. But before we get started, let's get a call to action. Let's get these sponsors out here. Sponsors, give us a follow. Give us a shout. Followers, go subscribe and smash that YouTube button. Please subscribe to us. Follow us, like us, leave us a 5-star review. We're now on Spotify as well. So if you could tune into Spotify as well, we'd appreciate it. Like us and love us there too. Coach, let's get into it. Let's get started. So happy to have you. But let's talk about, let's lead in with your personal journey first, if we could, and sort of set the table, the foundation, and let it rip.
Absolutely. Was born and raised Cincinnati, Ohio. Had a mother that was an alcoholic and a drug addict. I had a father that wasn't very present. Was raised by my grandmother. Went to good schools. My grandmother made sure that I went to good schools. So I went to Catholic private elementary school, K through 8, Nativity, which is, I was born and raised in what was called Pleasant Ridge at the time. And so Mom wasn't around much. Dad wasn't around much. I was raised by my grandmother. My grandmother was a janitor. Had a very chaotic childhood. My mother dealing with substance abuse issues, father not being around, being raised by my grandmother. My grandmother, like I said, was a janitor, and so she cleaned office buildings for a living. And we didn't have a lot. There was times that we didn't have anything. And so, through those times, it was one of those things that I watched my grandmother suffer. She was the one that was trying to keep the lights on. She was the one that was trying to keep the food on the table. And there was times that there wasn't lights and there wasn't food.
Yes, sir.
And so I remember an entire summer, we didn't have electricity. We had camping lights that she would go buy batteries for.
Yes, sir.
And if you've ever been in the Midwest during the summertime,
It's warm.
it's very warm.
It's warm.
So
Cold in the winter and hot in the summer.
Very much so. Very humid. And so, I learned my work ethic from my grandmother, watching her clean office buildings, emptying trash. And even as a kid, when I was young, it was one of those situations to where I was always trying to think of a way, how can I get my grandmother out of this situation?
Yes, sir.
And she was always my biggest supporter. And so, from 8th grade, I ended up going to one of the top high schools in the country at Moeller.
Okay.
In Cincinnati.
In Ohio, yes, sir.
Archbishop Moeller. One of the top 50 high schools, in the country. People like Buddy Bell, Larkin, Griffey Jr.,
Sure.
David Bell, Mike Bell, Jerry Faust.
Oh, wow. Okay,
who was
Notre Dame coach.
Correct,
Yes, sir.
but he was the coach, that was at. He went straight from high school, to the college, and so we all had dreams of, going to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
That was the thing, and so during that time, when I was 15, my grandmother was diagnosed with cancer. She worked up until the week before she died. And so when she passed, it was a very difficult time.
You kind of alone?
I was very much alone.
Yes, sir.
I kind of bounced around from place to place, was staying with friends, with coaches, ended up with my aunt and uncle. My father had remarried. Well, my mom and dad never married.
Yeah.
They had me when they were young. And so it was, it is what it is, type situation. But
Definitely made you stronger. There's no doubt about it.
well, absolutely. But during that time, it makes you question a lot. And being a kid,
Of course.
Why does my mom and my dad,
Yes, sir.
not want me? Why am I in this situation? Why? Because going through middle school or grade school, my family wasn't educated. My mom didn't graduate from high school. My dad didn't graduate from high school. My grandmother had an 8th grade education. So I struggled in school. School wasn't a priority in our home. Keeping the lights on and trying to keep food, in the house were the priorities. So I struggled. I didn't like school. Didn't really do well in school. But the one thing that I did do well was athletics.
Right.
Because I always felt like that was kind of my thing. That once we got between these lines, it didn't matter how much money your mama made, how much money your daddy made, what kind of house or what kind of car. Once we got between these lines, we were equal.
Right.
And so, from that point, I promised that nobody was going to outwork me.
Yes, sir.
I watched my grandmother break her back, work up until the day that she died. Pretty much that, nobody was going to outwork me.
Yes, sir. And this is off topic a little bit, but I know you said something about being Catholic. I mean, did your faith help you through some of that? I would assume your grandmother was
1,000,000%.
Yes, sir.
And that was my saving grace.
Yes, sir.
And
Yes.
that's where I really started to develop a very deep relationship.
Yes, sir.
With the Lord. It's funny you ask that. I used to go to mass in the mornings before school, praying that God would get me out of my
Lift you out.
situation.
Yes, sir.
And so that's when I really started to develop that relationship with the Lord. And I had promised that if the Lord got me out of my situation, that I would go back and I would help kids, very similar to me. My teachers and my coaches were my mentors.
Yes, sir.
Those were the people that I really wanted to, impress and do well for, not only them, but also for my grandmother. But, so when she passed, I kind of bounced around a little bit and ended up at my aunt and uncle's house, who gave me a home
in Ohio.
In Ohio,
Yes,
yes.
sir.
It
Okay.
was my mom's sister. Every family's got the crazy.
Yeah.
She was the sane one, in the family, and so really gave me some stability and an ability to feel safe. It's tough as a kid growing up with everything is chaotic, and you just grow up wondering why you're not loved and don't feel safe.
It's tough as a kid, for sure.
Absolutely. And it made you question a lot. And I kind of equate it to the story of Job, and so that's kind of how my outlook was, going through those experiences. And, if people are familiar with the story of Job, Job was tested.
Very patient.
He was patient and never turned against the Lord. And however, the devil had said, well, if you take all of that away, he'll turn against you. And God took his family, he took his health, he took his wealth from him, and he was still faithful. And so once God realized that he was faithful, he restored those things to Job. And so, and Job questioned him, and God basically said that, were you here when I created? Why do you question?
Right.
And ultimately that was the same. And so that's where my faith really grew, is that I started to realize early that this is my mission. This is my soul mission. I'm here to learn lessons, and I feel like as humans, that's our soul journey is to learn these lessons. This is a training ground for us, and that this human experience is for us consciously to evolve and spiritually evolve,
Yes, sir.
to being what we are really meant to be, which are, spiritual beings
Yes, sir.
and godly beings, and understanding that God isn't something that is outside of us, but it is something that is within us.
Absolutely.
And we search so much outside in these worldly things when the kingdom of God is really within. So through that relationship, I kind of understood what my purpose was.
But it had to be tough to understand that going through it. I mean, as a what are you, 15, 16 years old at this point?
I'm fit, and absolutely, and have a lot of questions.
Yes.
And don't have a whole lot
More
of
questions
guidance.
than answers.
Well, absolutely.
Yes.
And I didn't have a ton of guidance.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually, I was a good kid, never got in trouble, never got suspended, never got involved in drugs and drinking. Through my experience, I learned what I didn't want.
Yes. Unfortunately, yes.
Through poverty, through my mother's addictions, the absence of my father,
Mm-hmm.
the death of my grandmother, I had to grow up quick. And so I did everything on my own. So when my sophomore year, I had to leave Moeller, which broke my heart, but
Sure.
my family lived on the other side of town.
Mm-hmm.
They had 2 small children at the time, so it was hard for them to get over there. But my experience at Moeller was an unbelievable experience. It's a very special place, and if people aren't don't know much about it, the GCL in Cincinnati is big time.
Gotcha.
It's the St. X's, Elders,
Right.
Those are the heavyweights, in Ohio, and so. That experience, I hated leaving that experience. So I ended up going to the local high school. It was right down the street. It was very convenient for my aunt and uncle, and it was a good experience.
You thrived there, though.
I
athletically.
did. Athletically.
Yes, sir.
All this, all that, and the reality is none of that stuff, really matters.
Well, part of what I see with this, though, with this story, and I've told you before, I love this because this is just opening your soul right wide up for everybody
Yes,
to see
sir.
and hear. But sports and life, they come together. We always talk about on this show, but that's kind of where we are. But the trials and tribulations as a non-athlete or whatever are the same or very similar in the path as an athlete, right? I feel like sometimes those trials and tribulations, things that give you adversity, that makes you a better person, a better athlete
Absolutely.
on the backside of that if you handle your business correctly. And so I think that is a very important lesson on part
Absolutely.
of what your perseverance is on that story. And I just have to tie one other thing in, Coach. My grandmother up there in the corner right there with her Etowah jacket on, she lived to be 96. And grandparents are wonderful for your soul. So I can only
Absolutely.
imagine. I had her till I was 53 years old.
Right.
And so you losing yours at 15 is devastating. But my grandparents were integral parts of my life as well. So I
Absolutely.
appreciate your story. But you can continue. Like I said, I think where the trials and tribulations come, and it makes you a bigger, better, stronger person on the backside of that if you handle it properly, which obviously with your faith and inner strength, that was super important.
Well, without my faith, it would have been a very difficult, because without having that path, we can wander into, territories that we don't
Yes.
really belong. And so my faith really kept me on that path
Yes, sir.
without a whole lot of parental guidance.
Yes, sir. But then you go on, so you get to your other high school.
Correct.
And then you, obviously, we talked about you excel. You're a multi-sport
Correct.
kid in high school. What all sports did you play in high school?
Football, played football. I was captain of the football team.
Yes, sir.
All,
Everything. Yes, sir.
I wrestled, played baseball, kind of everything as well. But it was a very small pool,
Right.
It's
It's okay to be a big fish in a little pond,
Well,
sir.
ball in the north and ball in the south are,
Different.
very,
Yes, sir.
very
Yes, sir.
different. Very different. And I learned that when I moved. So I struggled in school.
Yes, sir.
Didn't have very good grades. Part of that was environment. Part of that was also, there was a level of laziness,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm being honest, because I still had a lot of that, why me,
Sure.
feeling sorry for myself, didn't really get it.
Right.
And I'm sure that there's plenty of kids out there, that are just like me in the very same situations, that, that feeling sorry for yourself, I got to a point where I realized this feeling sorry for myself is detrimental.
Yes.
It's not, this is a hindrance.
It's holding you back.
It's
Absolutely.
holding me back.
Yes, sir.
And so, but I didn't know,
Did your aunt and uncle push you like your grandmother pushed you academically / athletically?
not really.
Yeah.
They supported me athletically.
Right.
But it's just, I did what I needed to do.
To get by.
Right. But
Yeah.
I struggled.
Yes.
My mother drank when she was pregnant.
Oh, man.
And so I was in the slower classes when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was, I think that if I was diagnosed, I probably would have had, a learning disability,
Yes, sir.
but back then you were
Yeah.
just tracked
They
into
just
the
push you
slower
through.
classes,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Push them on through.
Yeah, and I did, and I never caused problems. I was one of those kids that I kind of got by because I was a good kid, and so people looked out for me.
Were you a leader as a young child or a young man at 16, 17 years old? Were you a leader in high school at that time?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I was captain,
Yeah,
captain
yes.
of the football
Okay.
team. You know what I mean? That those things, kind of fell into place. It was just I would get frustrated with school because I just didn't get it.
Right.
And a lot of that had to do with foundational things earlier on when I was younger that I struggled reading. I didn't really start reading until I got older and realized how beneficial, it was. But I didn't have somebody sitting down and saying, all right, we're doing homework tonight,
Right.
and we're going to sit here and we're going to make sure it gets done and it's done right. And,
Right.
we're doing what I didn't have that.
Nowadays, kids have a whole different foundation with their parents that are married, and I think that's big on development for your psyche, your
Absolutely.
social, all those different things, not just scholastically or athletically. But you go on to excel in multiple sports. You go on to college.
Correct.
And I'll let you pick that up from there, but I know
Right.
you were a multi-sport player in college as well.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
I went to, I went to a junior college in Dayton, Ohio.
Okay.
Called Sinclair Community College.
I lived in Dayton, Ohio.
Oh, yeah. Loved Dayton. I had a
Yeah.
really good time.
Cold winters.
Probably a little too much fun. I went and I needed to go get my grades up.
Yes, sir.
In order for me to be able to go to school. So I went JUCO my first year up in Dayton, got my grades together.
Baseball only at the JUCO?
Well, it was more, yes, it was baseball only, but more grade related.
Yeah, right.
And so ended up transferring down to what's now, it was Mount St. Joseph
Yes, sir.
College of Mount St. Joseph at the time, which is now Mount St. Joseph University.
Yes, sir.
And so I went down there with the intention on playing football, played football, and they also started, I was on the inaugural college team, the first team
Oh, wow.
of the college history,
That's amazing.
which was cool.
That's awesome.
It was neat to be.
Can't take that away from you.
No, it was neat to be able to start something,
Yes,
help
sir.
start something, which is pretty much thriving now.
Right.
And we had some good years, when I was there, but I was
What positions did you play?
kind of did a little bit of everything. I was middle infield, outfield, pitched when necessary, pitched a little bit, not much. Wasn't very good. I was
But we're not huge.
right. I was average to below average.
Yes, sir.
Baseball player. I was a much better football player than I was a baseball
What
player.
positions in football?
I was strong safety.
Okay.
And I was going to knock your block.
Yes, sir. I believe that, by the way.
that was everything that I had built up, was
The frustrations and take it out on the opponent and other people at practice.
And that, like I said, when we got between the lines, it didn't matter.
That's right.
It did not matter. And so, did that. And, I played 2 years of football, 2 years of baseball, graduated. And once I graduated, then I started teaching.
Okay.
And like I said, I chose teaching because I wanted to be able to have the opportunity to be able to go help kids.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I love that about you, Coach.
Yeah.
I really,
Well,
really
thank
do.
you.
Yes.
Thank
No,
you.
I know, but you can just tell it comes from the heart. It comes from the soul, and that's what I mean. That's again about this whole journey.
Absolutely.
And obviously, teaching and coaching, those are very similar kind of jobs. In my opinion, I think
Yes,
they're
very much
one
so.
and the same, right?
Yeah, very much so.
But I didn't mean to interrupt you. But yes, sir. So you started teaching, and then
Well, I started teaching. I started teaching alternative school programs.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Actually from the high school that I graduated from.
okay,
and I was there for a year and a half. And at that point, I was working full time, teaching, and I was also having to wait tables, at Outback. And
Making ends meet?
correct.
Yes, sir.
And I'm thinking to myself, I just put myself in debt. I chose the field that I'm in, and now I have to work two jobs, in order to be able to survive. I was like, there's got to be a better way. So I had a buddy of mine that was from Cincinnati that moved down, my best friend and also Caden's godfather.
Okay.
He moved down to Atlanta, and I would periodically come down and visit, on our breaks and things like that. Always had a really good time, and beautiful city. And that the time, kind of like right now, we're in a teacher shortage. And so the difference between what I was going to make, teaching and working the second job was exactly what I was going to end up making, doing one job.
Right.
And so I was like, this is an
Right. It makes sense. Yeah.
easy deal. And it was, to be honest with you, it was probably the best thing that I had done, for myself. I didn't have a job. I knew one person. I put my stuff in a U-Haul and headed down 75.
Yes, sir.
And it was
Probably the best decision you ever made, though, right?
by far.
Yes, sir.
By far. Because it was one of those opportunities that you just got away from the drama.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. You're kind of moving away from
Correct.
that epicenter of all the
Correct.
social struggles, if you will.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
And so it was honestly, and it gave me the opportunity to kind of distance myself from all of that and really evaluate, where and how and what, and who I want to become.
Right.
And so, along those lines, when you move, obviously you meet new people. And so, one funny story is that I was down here for about 30 days, and I had put in a whole bunch of applications, didn't get any bites.
Right.
So I actually packed all my stuff back up into the U-Haul and had it sitting out front
To go back home.
Wow. So one of our neighbors across the hall saw kind of what was going on and knocked on the door and was like, hey, what's going on? Like, I'm getting ready to go back. He was like, well, let's go grab lunch. So we went and grabbed lunch, and the Marietta Fruit Market. Are you familiar with?
No, sir.
I think that's what it was called. Anyway, it was a lunch spot. So we went to this lunch spot, and there was a whole table of teachers that were sitting behind us. And I heard them talking about teaching, so I was like, hey, I'm a teacher, was looking for a job. Do you guys have any recommendations? And they're like, oh, yeah, well, there's, they're looking here, they're
Right.
looking there, they're looking here. And again, I felt like this
Timing and the grace of God, right?
divine intervention.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I left there. The minute that I left there, I shot up to Campbell High School.
Okay.
And still
Cobb County School.
Correct.
One county down.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Stuff is packed in this U-Haul. Right. I jet up, and I was living right there in Smyrna.
Okay.
So it was literally right down the street.
Yes, sir. I also lived in Smyrna, by the way. Our paths are similar. I
Right.
told you that. Very similar.
So I went down to Campbell, and I met with the head football coach. The head football coach had just gotten the job.
Okay.
He was looking for help. And so we talked, and I'm like, this might be an opportunity. So he went and grabbed the special ed department head, who's one of my favorite people on earth, Annette Tucker. She is salt of the earth and an angel. She was like a mom, to me. So met with her, kind of talked, and ended up, next thing I know, we're talking about a job.
Phenomenal.
And so it ended up working out, put the move on hold.
Get rid of that U-Haul.
Right. Put the move on hold, put everything back into storage, for the time being, and then it ended up working out. So
Thank goodness, or we wouldn't be here today.
absolutely. And so, God is good
All the time.
all the time. And so, and the football coach was Greg Vandergriff.
Okay.
And one of the more
By
influential.
chance, is that Brock Vandergrift's dad?
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's who
wow.
it was.
Okay.
Right. And so he was an assistant coach at one point over at Wheeler, and he ended up getting the Campbell job. That was his first head coaching job. And so it was an experience for me because, Greg had D1 experience. He had been a college coach before, knew high school. He had been assistant high school coach. And so it was a great opportunity for me to be able to learn. And he was one of the most influential people in my coaching career because he really taught me how to be a coach. Coming down, from Cincinnati, you're young, you think
Sure.
And I quickly realized that I didn't know.
You didn't know what you didn't know.
I didn't know much. And so being around Greg, it gave me the opportunity to really learn how to be a coach. And he also brought in a buddy of his from Tennessee, Phil Ironside, who was our offensive coordinator, who was also another absolutely fantastic coach. He was the coach over at Hillgrove. He opened up, I believe, Hillgrove. And was just unbelievable. He was another one that was a very influential coach in my life. So learned a lot about how to coach, how to develop as a coach, really started investing in books, coaching books and self-help books, just constantly just consumed as much as I possibly could consume. And as I consumed all of that, I started to elevate. Then from there, I ended up, I spent 3 years at Campbell, moved over to Wheeler, where Coach David McDonald was the head coach.
Yes, sir.
Longtime head coach, 30 years at Wheeler. Very, he's done so much for the game of baseball. Right now, he's the head of the Georgia Dugout Club. But another fantastic, mentor to me.
Well, that's what I think. So I've got, again, we have a lot of similar stories. You're okay, Coach. It's all right. No problem. They know you're here, and they all want to make sure they get their get called out as well. But so my story is very similar to that in coaching. Part of the reason we all do this is because we want to give back. I would say pay it forward, but we're really kind of paying back what we received from those guys. And without those special people in our lives, coaches, and, I don't know if they ever, as a kid, if they paddled in Ohio, but some of those paddlings make a difference. And those men are trying to keep you on the straight and narrow. They're trying to keep you in the right direction, not just in sports, but in life. And I think that is what is immeasurable in those things. And I know that that's why you pour your heart and soul into that. But, you develop yourself a little bit, but you just continually grow as a person, as a coach, as an individual, and a trainer of men and women along the way. And I think that is a very, very big point there to recognize. And I think that anybody that's been coaching for a minute or that's had special people in their lives, that is a tremendous asset to have quality people like that. And then you get somebody that's that stable, 30 years in a job like that, and then they're already an awesome person and they're a fantastic coach. It just pushes you to want to develop and be a better everything else too because of those guys leading your way.
Absolutely. And iron sharpens iron.
Absolutely.
And that was the thing is I was surrounded by good people and good coaches, and it just elevated me, even more.
Yes, sir.
I was always motivated.
Right.
I always wanted to be a good coach. Sometimes too much, to be completely honest with you. And I'll kind of come back to that later on because, prior to having children, you set up these goals and aspirations of things that you want to do and become. And once you have kids, it's a complete paradigm shift.
Right.
You don't, obviously
different focus.
Well, and it's just, it's never, and now it's not about you.
Right.
It's no longer about you. And so, greatest gift, that I've ever been given. So I had the opportunity, to work at Wheeler for 8 years. Great experience. We had a couple of, draft picks come out of there. Hermida came out the year before I got there. We had a 3rd round pick with Michael Slack.
Jeremy Hermida? Okay.
Yep. We had 4 players off of one team that ended up getting drafted. Evan Mitchell, who went to Mississippi State, was drafted by the Reds. Sam Agnew-Whelan, who went to App State. He ended up going to the Yankees. Sam Bragg was drafted by I think he went JUCO and was drafted by the Athletics. And then Dale Carey, who went to Miami and was drafted by the Nationals.
As a coach, how does that make you feel with those guys? I mean, does that not make you feel like the utmost pride of almost like it's not your son, but it's like the next best thing kind of?
Yes and no. I mean, obviously those kids were extremely talented.
Sure.
And I played a very small part.
Sure.
In their journey. But I learned more through their experience because we were dealing with, the college coaches, the high school coaches, or the pro scouts, and dealing with those guys. And so that was the first time I'd ever really been in that kind of environment to where, it was active like that.
Right.
And so that was my first step into really higher level baseball.
Right.
And so another growth and opportunity for myself. I learned a lot, just by being part of the process, which eventually helped me out, obviously, later on down the road with my son.
From Wheeler, do you move on then? You're an assistant coach at Wheeler?
Correct.
Okay, and then from Wheeler, you move on to?
I ended up, I met my wife.
Okay.
At my time with Wheeler.
And give her a shout out.
Yes, my wife, Jackie. I love
Jackie,
you.
shout out. He loves you.
Yes, and thank you for letting me be here.
That's right.
And at the time, she had a 6-year-old Chandler, who I don't like saying stepson.
Right, your son, yeah.
Correct. Sure. But at the time, she didn't want to move Chandler away from his friends, to come up to Cobb. So I started searching down on the south side and ended up getting a job at Heritage High School. So that was my first head coaching job. And great experience for me. It was a great place. It's kind of a funny story that the guy that was the head coach at the time, Casey Teal, very fantastic coach, did a lot at Alexander, also did a lot at Heritage at the time. In the 2000s, Heritage and Greenbrier were always going back and forth, between region champs and Sweet 16, Elite 8, all that. So I had, through my experience when I was at Wheeler, Coach McDonald got me involved with the Georgia Dugout Club All-Star team. I was a voluntary coach at the time, and so I just did whatever they needed. Go get this, go do this, go do this.
Step and fetch if you have to.
Right, throw BP, I did whatever.
Right.
And Casey was the head coach of that All-Star team for that. And so during that time, he was getting ready to retire, and when he was ready to retire, he called me up and was like, "Hey, would you be interested in this job?" And I'm like, "Yeah." But that experience came from me doing the dirty work,
right, the grunt work, so to speak,
of being, a volunteer
an
assistant.
Unpaid, yes, sir.
Correct. And so that experience is what led to my head coaching experience was. And I say that to say this is that you don't know what experiences, that you're going through that will lead to later opportunities later on down the road. And so I was, obviously extremely grateful.
You took advantage of your situation
Absolutely.
and made the best of it.
But it was, I would just work as hard as I could.
Right.
And that was my thing is that, if you work hard and you've got a good attitude, opportunities will present themselves. And it did. And so took advantage of that opportunity, had a really good experience at Heritage, and I was also coaching travel baseball at the time.
You were at Heritage for several years.
7 years.
Yes,
5 of them, I was the head coach there. Stayed an extra 2 years, and then until I was looking for, because my son was coming up at that time. He was getting old enough. And so the amount of time that I was spending between travel baseball and being a head coach, I didn't have a dad, and I was going to make sure that my son had all the opportunities that I didn't have as a kid.
And I love that.
So I stepped down as the head coach. I quit coaching travel baseball. And
For your son. I mean, that's really why we're doing this, for your family. You're stepping back because
Yes.
you want to go be a dad and be the best dad you can be.
Well, I wanted to make sure, because I knew early that he was going to be pretty good.
A stud. You don't have to say it, Coach. I'll say it. He's a stud.
Well,
But I know what you mean.
I knew
There was something special.
He was a different kid.
Yes, sir.
He was. He never threw tantrums. He never screamed. He never just had these breakdowns or anything. He was just a very even keeled
Right.
kid, and just he was very easy.
Well, I can see where he gets that, Coach. You're very even keeled as well.
At times.
Yeah, there's a wild side every now and then.
I have my moments.
Yes,
yes,
sir.
and I think we all do.
Yes, sir.
But
Some
yeah.
more than others.
Right. So I took a middle school job over in Henry County, actually in the county that we were in, because, we were in two different counties at the time. He was in Henry, I was in Rockdale, and our breaks and things like that were different.
Mm-hmm.
They would have spring break on the different
Right.
week that I had spring, and it was just, I didn't like it.
Didn't work.
It didn't. I didn't like that.
Right.
I wanted to spend time with my family.
Right.
And family is extremely important to me. So taking the job, I took a middle school job. I took the AD job at Ola Middle, and I was there for 8 years in multiple capacities. But it freed me up. I would go pick him up from daycare. We would go to the field. We would go toss and hit every day.
Right.
Every day. And every day when I would get home, he's standing at the, on the driveway.
Waiting for you.
Yeah, waiting
Yeah.
for me. And so we were.
That makes your heart warmer, does it not? Oh, my gosh. That's what life's about.
There's nothing.
Yes, sir.
Nothing better.
So special.
Nothing better. And look back on those days very
Right.
fondly. So, I did the middle school. And as he was coming up through middle school, 11, 12, that's when things really started to accelerate for him.
Mm-hmm.
He was, perfect game, select fest at 11,
Right.
12, 13, so we knew, that this path, was kind of where he was headed. He got his first offer in 8th grade
Wow.
from a Big Ten school.
That's amazing.
They offered him in 8th grade. That's back when the rule was,
Right. Yes.
they could pretty much offer whenever. So we didn't take, obviously, we didn't take the offer. We were obviously, but what it did show me is we're on the right path.
Was it a school in Ohio?
No.
Okay.
It was a school in Indiana.
Okay. Yes, sir. Okay.
And so, from there, I also took him to USA, because start getting him involved in the USA program early. So they have what is called the Champions Cup, where you go to a regional, you try out at the regional, and then they decide whether or not if you're gonna represent the Southeast region.
Yes.
And so he was on the number 1 team for the Southeast region.
And this is at 12?
Yes.
12. Okay. Okay.
So he was 11 at the time.
11. Okay. Well, because he's younger than
But
most.
it was for the 12.
Right. Yes, sir.
U.
Yes.
And so the national teams are every 3 years, 12, 15, and 18.
Okay.
In between those years, they have programming for that particular cycle. So if the Champions Cup was kind of the first initial cycle for the 12U, and so he went and got selected.
Yep. That's awesome.
Participated in it. You get a letter. You go to a camp, ID camp. Then you go to Cary, where you compete against all the other regions, and then from there they'll give you a letter on a private workout. Then from the private workout, you get selected on whether you're going to go to training camp. So he got selected to go to training camp. We were prepped to go to training camp, and then he ended up having Osgood-Slaughters.
Yep. Knee problems.
And he couldn't run, couldn't jump, couldn't squat.
Yep.
But so we ended up getting cut, from that. Got invited back the following year for what was called ADP, the Athlete Development Program.
Okay.
The ADP then leads to the 15U. So
Okay.
you got 2 years, 13, 14 ADP, 13, 14 ADP. Well, he did that for 2 years and then got invited back to the 15U. Made 15U training camp, got cut. And so got invited back for the what's called the NTDP, National Team Development Program. They do that for 2 years for the 18U cycle. So we're 1 year into the NTDP. Hopefully we get invited back for an opportunity to be invited to 18U training camp. So that experience, that's the USA experience. But
the adversity, I'm sure, motivated him tremendously, right? And
absolutely,
right,
this is a
Pushed
kid.
him.
This is a kid that's never been cut.
right, exactly.
But this is what it was all about. Is our goal was to to go out and be one of the top players in the country, and so we just weren't there yet.
Yes, sir.
And so once we got through 8th grade, I knew that we needed to get back up on this side of town,
Right.
for baseball.
Yes, sir.
Obviously, this area is very saturated, with high level players, resources, all the things that I knew that, he needed.
Right.
And we were driving an hour and a half to go to Dojo, David
Right.
Sapalka, over at El Dojo over in Chamblee, Maven, down there in Atlanta, Maven Baseball Lab. That's where he's hit ever since he was in 8th grade. So he's been training at Dojo since he was in 8th grade. He's been training at Maven Baseball Lab since he was young.
Right.
So, but I knew that if he was going to have a pro level swing, that we needed to get with, higher level,
Right.
professional
Yes, sir.
trainers. And so that's what we did. And so we needed to get closer to East Cobb and Lake Point. And,
Right.
and just be in the vicinity of baseball.
Well, people don't understand, but Coach Grainer and I have talked about this a bunch on our shows. But I mean, we're literally in the middle of two meccas. I mean, now it's East Cobb and Perfect Game or whatever at Lake Point. But I mean, we are basically right in the center almost of those two meccas of baseball in the Atlanta area. So you got to drive by Etowah to get to East Cobb. You got to drive by Etowah to get to Perfect Game. So, I mean, the baseball over here is tremendous.
Absolutely.
I know we talked about it, but I mean, they're going to play a region rival in the state championship.
Correct.
So, which is amazing. And, not to bring up a sore subject, but last year Walton won it in 6A, and they're also in our region. So we are in a dominant area of baseball. And so you move over here, bring Caden to this area and then how did you sort of decide where you would end up or where Caden would end up?
Well, obviously, we looked at top programs.
Yes, sir.
And so we followed along. We looked at Buford. Was one of the stops. My wife at the time also, she got a new job.
Okay.
She's worked for UPS for over 30 years, and so she got a promotion, and so they promoted her to corporate. So we were looking at places logistically that were good for both of us. So Buford was one of those places. I was looking at rosters.
Right.
I did my due diligence. I was looking at programs.
I would expect that from you, by the way.
Right.
Yes, sir.
It was one of those things that you got to do your due diligence. And so I looked at the track record of Etowah. The 2 years previous, they were in the state championship. They were in the Final Four. They lost their catcher off of the Final Four team. So I knew that there was an opening.
Yes, sir.
They also had two players, Angelakis and Caleb Hughes.
Georgia Tech and now Mercer.
Correct. Both of them were getting professional attention.
Yes, sir.
So I knew that if he was the catcher, starting as a freshman,
Right.
that there would be eyeballs on him.
Those dudes are throwing to him.
And we also had obviously there were other good players there
Sure.
as well. And that's basically what happened is we made the move. He was able to win the starting position as a freshman. Played the entire year. I had some struggle, but that's to be expected, and I knew that was part of the deal.
But let's be real, starting as a varsity kid, as a freshman, and he's a young freshman. I'm assuming, is he 14 at this point?
He was 14 years old throughout the entire
Because he's a
high school
16-year-old junior right now.
Correct.
Yeah, so, I mean, he's one of the youngest people in his class.
Well, yes, he may be
The youngest, okay, which is really good for...
Yeah, absolutely. But but there's a lot of benefits, to it.
Right.
Early on, before we moved, we'd actually reconsidered, reclassing him. But he's an extremely mature,
Right.
young man.
Yes.
And I'm very proud.
Very
of him.
cerebral.
Well, just very, like I said, he was very just
Yes, even keel.
very
Yes, sir.
much so, and so it doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. Just a good kid.
But that's the perfect mentality for baseball, too. I mean, you have to have that
Absolutely.
mentality right there because you hit 300 and you struggle 70% of the time and you're still
Correct.
a superhero.
Correct.
He's a freshman and he's dominating. Well, he's not dominating. He has some struggles.
Well, he struggled.
But he's a young freshman. He's
Correct.
a 14-year-old freshman, and he finally finds his zone with Husey and with Angelakis and some
Correct.
of those guys, and getting eyes on him through the college perspective. But
Correct.
when you got those dogs throwing to him and he's receiving every
Right.
one of them, I mean, that's amazing as well. So
and having the opportunity to
Showcase.
to do as well as we did,
Right.
with that crew, and winning the state championship, that was pretty awesome experience and validated the reason that we chose Etowah.
And I think since 2017, I believe they've had is it at least 6 Final Four appearances, maybe with five Final Four appearances, and
3 state championship appearances.
about to be 4, baby. Let's go.
So yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So pretty cool experience, without a doubt. So then we, also into my consideration was, we had met Trevor and Dion at USA.
Okay.
So we kind of knew, they had Charm, Trevor, and Dion in that 26 class, so that once Angelakis and Hughes were gone, then we had
Another stable full.
absolutely, and we had Jackson Rose, who ended up going to
He was a catcher, correct?
Jackson Rose, left-handed pitcher,
Oh, my bad. Okay, I'm sorry.
who's presently at North Carolina.
Okay, I knew it was at Carolina. Okay.
Right. So that following year, we still had Sharman and Rose as our 1 and 2. Made a decent run, just went to Lowndes and just didn't play well.
Okay.
Tough environment. Just didn't play well. Had an opportunity to win game 1, we just couldn't pull it out, and then just at that point, we didn't didn't hit game 2, so lost in the Final Four last year.
Yes, sir.
So circle back. Now with the 26 class are now seniors, and so now we've added Colin Anderson, to the mix, which was a huge, addition, to our lineup as well. Trevor being a first round pick, Dion being a Georgia Tech commit, Charm,
Just more eyes though come into that program every single
absolutely.
day, more scouts and everything
Well,
else.
and then also through, Trevor's experience, Trevor's worked himself into being a first round pick.
Yep.
And so obviously there's been a lot of traffic, and it's benefited everybody, through that experience, through this process. So it's helped him. Fortunately, last year, Caden was selected to go to East Coast Pro,
Nice.
which, he was a year ahead. The 26th class was kind of down catcher-wise. So he was invited to go to the workout. Our advisor had said, this is a huge, this is a big deal, for him. Probably won't make it, but it's good experience for him. So he went to the workout, ended up making it. Then they said, well, he probably won't play very much. Goes down, started 2 games, played in every game. At-bats were minimal, which was perfectly fine.
Right.
He got 3 at-bats, ended up hitting a double his last day down there. So he's hit 333 at East Coast Pro.
Right.
And that's a huge deal. But what it did, East Coast Pros, that's 420 professional scouts.
Right.
That is a, professional event. And so that's kind of started his process, for professional baseball as well.
Has he said since he was a kid, or at what age did he feel like he wanted to play pro baseball at 6. I mean,
Well, that's always what he's wanted to be.
Yeah.
You know, he loves the game.
Right.
You know, and that's just what we are and what we do.
Right.
You know, in our family, that's just the way that it's been.
Well, to excel, you got to love the grind. You got to love to work out. You got to love to practice. You got to love to train. You got to love to take care of your body. All those things.
And he's done a very good job.
Yes, sir.
You know, of all that. And again, I'm very grateful for all the people that have been involved.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in his process. You know, I've made sure. You know, there was a certain time when I knew that I needed to kind of step away from coaching him so that he would learn. You know, to be coached by other people and be coachable.
Right.
You know, by other people, but I also wanted to make sure that that experience was with the best people. And so we did everything that we could to make sure that, you know, his circle is all very, very qualified and people that are the best at what they do.
Yes, sir. Well, let's advance that, and now we get into the recruiting phases. I mean, the serious recruiting phases of this. When did all that sort of take off? Was it his freshman year that it took off, essentially, for recruiting, or
Not necessarily. You know, the recruiting cycle is really the summer leading up to your junior year.
Okay.
Now that the rule has changed.
Yes, sir.
You know, now August 1st is when they can offer you. So that summer is really when.
August 1st of your junior year?
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Going
Okay.
into your junior
going
year.
into yes, sir.
Correct.
Yes.
So it was one of those, you know, that summer, his 16-year-old summer that's the big summer.
Right.
You know, and so for those people that are listening, you know, that's the one thing that people need to understand is that, you know, in the recruiting process, you have to be very, 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 very assertive on your own.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you need to be with an organization that has the contacts that are necessary to help you get to where you need to be.
Right.
This is not a thing that happens by chance.
Right.
You know, you can go and you can play great and nobody's there, you know, and
So it's like if you're just because you're great doesn't mean they're going to find you. Is what
Correct.
you're saying, correct? Yes,
correct.
sir. Okay.
Now, doesn't mean, you know, if there's good players out there, they're going to find, you know, if you get enough,
Sure.
you know, traction behind
But you have to put in the legwork
absolutely
to get
you know,
noticed.
and that was one of the things that I did for Caden,
Right.
you know, is that, you know, Twitter, which is X now,
Right.
is one of the main tools of college coaching.
Yes, sir.
So posting highlights, I don't use any of my social media for anything personal.
Right,
All
okay.
of my social media was used to drive, you know, his content, you know, to get that stuff out because a lot of the people that are on my social media were former players of mine, coaches,
Sure.
recruiting coordinators. So those were the people that were seeing, you know, those types of things. It wasn't I was a proud dad, you know.
Right.
I just understood the process,
Right.
you know, earlier and knew that, you know, we needed to get this content out, you know, for him.
Well, and just as a point of reference, I mean, I know we've talked about this, but everybody doesn't know this. I mean, he was a social media sensation at 12, 13 years old. I mean, I know he's got thousands of like 30, 40, 50,000 followers on his socials. So he put in some legwork young.
Absolutely.
And then it sort of helped propel and carry him into that recruiting phase. Obviously, he had to put a little more legwork in, but I think that was probably an integral part of his success as well. Starting early and then finishing strong as he goes through the process with the help of, you know, an amazing dad, an amazing coach like yourself. Let's get into some of the recruiting stuff as far as the colleges and the offers and the visits and kind of how that process worked. And when you kind of knew, I know we've talked about this, but let's share with the audience kind of that journey that he took through the recruiting phases and the visits. And I hope you want to tell that Alabama story. I'd love to hear the Alabama. Was it the Alabama recruiting story where he was the lone?
Yes.
Okay, so I would love you to share those if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, the process obviously started early for him. Being one of the more high profile guys, you know, those kids that are in Select Fest, you know, the PBR, you know, Futures Games, those guys do benefit, you know, from that and having that recognition. That kind of puts you kind of in a different category,
Right.
as, you know, and so, but what is necessary in order for a person to be able to do that is that you have to participate, you know, in some of their like national showcases
Right.
and things like that. So as a parent, if you don't know that, that's one of the things that you need to know is that, you know, in order to be eligible for those things, you need to do those showcases. Yes, financially it's tough, but it is one of the things that are necessary in order, you know, to open those types of
Right.
doors, for them. Obviously, playing in those events also helps. They do a lot of coverage, with their events, whether it's PBR or PG. They do a very good job of, getting information out and highlighting kids and promoting kids. So, he benefited significantly, from that stuff. The Select Fests, the USA was big. USA is a big deal. And if you have the ability to be able to do that, I do recommend, because that's another avenue of exposure for your child.
Exposure is critical.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
And that's the one thing that I feel like that I've done a very good job of, is that I've always placed him in the right spots.
Right.
For him to be seen, through our USA experience and with PG and PBR. So those are all necessary things, Is it the end all be all? No, there's kids that pop later. There's things, that take place. Doesn't mean the kid can't be recruited or get signed or anything else like that, but it's part of the journey.
Right.
And unfortunately, financially, it's, but you do what you got to do.
Right. Well, hopefully the end result of this is long-term success, which I fully expect. But so I know he was recruited by tons of Power 4, Power 5 schools,
Yep.
All the big-time baseball schools, guys that are in the top 5 right now in the country. Let's elaborate on some of that stuff, because I know a lot of the story, but I want our fans to hear kind of the recruiting stuff and the coaches coming to you and sort of how you handle that as a player and as a dad and as a coach. The
coaches really don't come to you very much.
Okay.
I mean, to be honest with you, they are very kind of hands off.
Okay.
That's the one thing is that, during that summer, he had a really good summer. He ended up hitting 459 for the summer, in the time that he really needed to do it. His 15-year-old year, he struggled a little bit. We were kind of in between swings, of the old swing and the new swing and, the high level swing. And so that was the year that things kind of flipped for him. Had a good sophomore high school season, had a really good summer going in. One of the things that we did that I felt like was of the utmost benefit was we didn't play fall baseball.
Right. I know you talked about that. I think that's something that's not common to a lot of people.
Correct.
Yeah, let's discuss that.
Well, a lot of people are worried about, the fear of missing out.
Right.
But you actually have to understand where your individual child is. Caden, being one of the younger kids in that class, physically at the time wasn't as big as some of these other kids. Now, granted, some of these other kids had reclassed down. They were a year and a half older than him. And he was where in his class where he was supposed to be, but a year, younger. So physically, there was a difference there. And so we knew what we needed to do, which was focus on the physicality.
Right.
So we took the last 2 falls off so that we could focus on hitting the weight room and really dialing in the swing.
Right.
And so not playing fall baseball, and allowed him to be able to work on the swing without having to worry about results. We were able to put in our time up at Rapid and lifting weights. Rapid Performance is where a lot of our kids go. They do a great job, but I sent him there specifically for speed, explosion, and rotational force.
Okay.
We did all of our work at Etowah strength-wise with our head strength coach, Andrew Sugg, who does a fantastic job for all of our programs. But he did a really good job with Caden in developing a program for Caden. Caden put on 15 to 20 pounds over this past fall, which was, he was, 16 years old, now we're starting to get the testosterone rush, the man juice, started getting that stuff going. And so with that, we really focused on the diet, the supplementation, and just really being dialed in, and it's made a significant difference. He went from 160 pounds when he first got there to he's 190 pounds right now. Our ultimate goal is going to end up being about 205, by next year going. And
he's about 6'1"?
6'1".
6'1", okay. Okay. But so does that give his body, does his body truly get to rest during those times? I don't really feel like, I know you're not doing the rigors of catching and fall and we're
catching.
Yeah, well, I'm saying as far as you're not
but we're not
participating in
doing
games.
it.
Yeah, but so his body's truly still not resting. He's just in a different capacity than on-field stuff.
And you have to understand where your blocks are, as far as, where is your training window in order for you to get better.
Right.
And really that's the fall, in that November, December, time, you're prepping to get ready for the high school season. But that August, to November time is, once the summer season ends, you've got to shut it down for a little bit.
Right.
You've got to give your body a rest.
Right.
These kids they're developing. They're not professional athletes. They're playing significant amount. I think we'll hopefully end up playing 40 games.
Right.
In the high school season, we'll turn around and probably play another 40, during the summer season. The MLB game, 162 games. That's a lot of games.
Right.
And especially for these young kids that are still growing, still developing. They've got to have time off.
Right.
So at what point do you get better?
Mm-hmm.
And so I made the decision, look, we're not going to play fall ball. We're just going to focus on our development and getting as big and strong as we possibly can. And that's what we did.
Yes, sir.
And so it's paid dividends for us. His 60 time went from 7.2 to 6.8.
Oh, wow.
Well,
okay.
now you got a catcher that's running 6.8. That's, on the upper level.
Solid. Yes, sir.
Very, you're
65, 70 on your grade there on the speed for a catcher, I guess. Maybe
Well,
maybe not quite that high, but I mean,
right.
it's good speed for a catcher.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
But and so the explosion, that's what, when we go to rapid, those are the things that we're training so that when we do these pro workouts, which he's done many of them, that you got a catcher that if he can get it down to a 6'6", 6'7", you're talking about elite athleticism.
Yes, sir.
As far as behind the catching position.
Right.
And that's what they like the most about him is the athleticism, behind the dish.
Right.
And so that's what we really focus on and work towards. And obviously more mass, more gas.
Right.
We're going to hit it harder. We're going to hit it further, and so that's really, the focal point during the fall.
Bigger, stronger, faster.
Absolutely.
Let's get there. Well, let's jump into that to some of that recruiting stuff, if you don't mind, and
Sure.
then we'll jump into, and then I want to follow that back up with some NIL opportunities and things of that nature that everybody in the country doesn't know about, including myself. I want to hear some of that, but let's jump in.
We're still learning about it.
Right. But you've been inundated with it, right? So
Yes.
But the recruiting process, he's a Clemson commit currently,
Correct.
right? He's a junior.
Yep.
He's a young junior. By the time he graduates, his senior year, I think you told me he's going to be 18 years and 1 month.
1 month
Yes, sir.
at the draft.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, at the draft. Yes, sir, at the draft. So let's get into the. I know you're a big fan of Coach Bakich and Clemson.
Absolutely.
Lead us down that road with the recruiting processes.
So we originally had 8 visits that we had set up.
Yes, sir.
Clemson being the first visit because everywhere that we went over the summer, Clemson was standing there.
Right.
And everything that he did, they videoed, they took notes. It was very obvious that he was a high priority,
Yes, sir.
For them. And so, mental note, as we were going from place to place, we would go from West Palm to Cary to Hoover, and every time I looked over, there was somebody from Clemson that was standing there. He had visits that were set up to Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, Georgia Tech, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Ole Miss.
But all premier programs.
Absolutely.
SEC, they don't get any better than that. ACC baseball
Correct.
don't get any better than that.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
And so Alabama kind of jumped in. They found out that Clemson was going to be our first visit. So that was set up for September 6th. September 1st was the actual first day
Right.
that you could actually do on-campus visits. And so they were very high on him. So they invited him down individually. And it was a very good visit. Loved the staff. It just wasn't, the right fit, for him.
Right.
After him going to Clemson.
Right.
Clemson, it just
felt right.
Well, and it just did.
But when people want you, that's gotta be a great feeling right there. When people
Absolutely.
are following your every move, that's gotta be a reassurance.
Well, and also, he was at East Coast Pro on August 1st.
Okay.
So he was dealing with East Coast Pro, which, people that don't know East Coast Pro, it's like I said earlier, it's a pro event, but it is an event where you drop them off and
Right.
they're theirs.
Right.
It's very similar to USA. USA is the same way. Like when you drop them off, they are with USA.
Right.
Where there's not a whole lot of dialogue, there's not a whole lot of interaction. We're still going to the games and the workouts and things like that, but they're just, they're on their own, which is a great thing. They've got to learn that independence and, this is what higher level ball is all about. So, so he's down at East Coast Pro, and originally we had told him don't answer the phone, while you're down there. Our advisor had told him, they had put together a text, and also a voicemail message that says, hey, I'm at East Coast Pro. Thank you for your call. I appreciate it very much, and I'll be back in touch with you after East Coast Pro. No, he didn't do that. 12 o'clock, because they can start making calls at 12 o'clock on August 1st.
Okay.
Well, being down there in Hoover, that was 11 o'clock.
Right.
So 11 o'clock, his phone started ringing, and text messages started coming. But at 11 o'clock on the dot, Bakich was on the phone,
Head coach of Clemson.
You want to
Yes,
you want to be a Tiger, and so that he was juiced up about that.
Sure. Well, who wouldn't be?
Right. And so we went on our visit. Visit just was unreal. And he knew, and so it was just, he's like, this is where I want to be. And so we didn't go on any other visits, and, we committed to Clemson.
Right.
Great facilities. The coaching staff was phenomenal. I'm a big fan of Bakich. Bakich and Tim Corbin came up together under Coach Leggett, very similar in their styles, and also their development of young men after baseball.
Yes, sir.
And that was a big thing for me because, Caden's going to be a good player regardless.
Right.
He's going to work hard. He's going to do, he's going to do what he needs to do to be a good player. I wanted to make sure that he was in an environment that was going to help him grow as a man so that he would have success outside, after baseball.
Right.
And so that was big for me.
Yes, sir.
So when we sat down and, Coach Bakich did his thing, it was very evident that's a big part of, their culture and what they're about.
Right.
And it just felt, we were very much in alignment.
Leaders of men,
Absolutely.
not just baseball coaches.
Correct.
Well, that's instrumental in like you said, the development long term for the adult after baseball,
Yep.
right? And so, I can only imagine that he's going to end up paying it forward just like you do too, which is so cool. So he's got some great guys in his life.
Yep.
But I do want you to touch on that Alabama story if you don't mind. I think it's pretty cool. Didn't he go on? Was it Clemson or Alabama where he went on and they got him where he was the only one there?
That was the Alabama.
We'll touch on that real quick because I think that's a really cool story because he's already kind of leaning towards Clemson, right?
Well, that was our original, yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes. And so, like I had said, Alabama jumped in. We went down on the visit, very impressed with the coaching staff, but it just didn't feel like home.
Yes.
And it was it was different because, on most of your recruiting visits, you go to the game. There wasn't a game on that day.
Right.
It was actually on a holiday. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't a whole lot of kids at the, on campus. So it was a different, type of, but it was very obvious that, Alabama had a high level of interest in
Sure.
it, which we were grateful for.
Right.
And there wasn't anything. It was just about what was the best fit.
But that visit probably solidified Clemson even more in his mind, I guess, since it was a little different than the Clemson feel, and I would assume that just says,
and it gave him something to compare.
Sure, absolutely.
And I'm glad that we actually did it because it gave him something to compare, Clemson to.
Yes, sir.
And so that it ended up beneficial,
So a few years ago, they switched in high school in Georgia. It's not in every state, but you can get NILs now in high school. This is such a cool process. Obviously, we probably wish we had some of that if we were good enough. I know I wasn't good enough.
I wasn't good enough
Me neither.
either.
But maybe some bubble gum or something in a bucket for me or whatever. But talk about the NIL process because I would love to hear. I know you've mentioned to me some of the sponsors and folks that he has, and I know Etowah Baseball has a lot of NIL kids on there. But let's talk about Caden's in particular with some of the sponsors and some of the NIL, or not sponsors, excuse me, but some of the NIL stuff that he's gone through and how that process works? Maybe if you have a minute on that.
Sure. It's obviously very new, and it's taken a significant. We still don't know everything about it.
Yes, sir.
So, through this process, the majority of that comes through what he had built himself, social media wise, because they're looking for athletes with reach. And so obviously his reach was pretty significant, which opened up these opportunities. We are with what was formerly the Wasserman Group out of California that now has an office here in Atlanta, and our advisors, Al Getz and Tyler Pasternicki, former shortstop with the Atlanta Braves, and
yes, sir.
played with multiple teams as well. But those are our advisors. Wasserman is now called the Team. It is, and so Wasserman has a NIL division.
Okay.
Where they have a person that is strictly dedicated to getting their athletes NIL opportunities. And so he's very fortunate, with his reach and with the help of our advisors to be able to secure, a couple of those opportunities. One being with Combat
Bats.
Combat Bats.
Yes, sir.
He's in Combat also has Rawlings owns Combat.
Okay.
So he's got Rawlings glove. He had a Franklin deal at one point. Who else? Baseball Lifestyle 101. He was one of their the feature athlete of, and so we're getting ready actually to do another
Lifestyle. Yes, sir.
We're getting ready to do another shoot here shortly. They'll be down here on the 29th, to shoot some content. And then we're going to have to July go to Southern California to shoot some more content. But pretty cool experience. I mean, the kid gets
Really cool.
Stuff constantly,
Right.
in the mail, and even from people that he's not affiliated with that wanting to, look at their products and things like that. So
but let's be real. You got to be a very mature kid to sort of. That's a lot of stuff to handle as a young man. I mean, 18, 19 years old. It's still a tough handle.
There's contracts.
Yes.
That you deal with, and fortunately, our
Does the team handle that?
they do.
Okay. Yes, sir. So they'll
Yes.
negotiate and check boxes, dot I's, cross
So
T's.
they redline through all the contracts.
Sure.
They negotiate certain clauses.
Awesome.
To make sure that it's in the best interest of the athlete.
Yes, sir.
He had one with the Panini Card Group, which was through USA. Which was cool.
And you're going to get me one of those cards.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to it. I'd like a signature if I get on there too.
Absolutely.
Please.
Yes, 1,000,000%.
Well, so, we talked about some training in and out. We talked about some NIL stuff. I mean, where does it stop after a certain point, or is he still just going to get flooded for another year and a half with NIL stuff going into college?
Well, hopefully that's the case.
Yes, sir.
Hopefully that's the case. That going into it, I don't think it would be as much just because of the contractual obligations of the college. For example, Clemson has a Marucci deal, so his Combat deal wouldn't be able to carry over, to that. So, like once the high school season for next year would be over, that would be it for the contract for Combat.
Okay.
Unless they turned into a Combat school.
Understood.
And then he would be able to, potentially do it. So, same thing. We had an offer, from another company that was head to toe that we turned down because it just limited his earning opportunities.
Right. Sure.
If he's wearing just one, he couldn't get separate gloves,
Absolutely.
bats,
Yes.
Equipment deal,
That's so
whatever.
cool, though. That's
but
so
it's
awesome.
just it's things that as when we were kids we didn't even think about.
No.
And now you've got 16-year-old kids having these opportunities to be able to financially, make money and just.
It completely shifts the gear, though, from like when you're a pro and having to deal with that to
Correct.
to college even now that you can still deal with that. And now then, like you said, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids trying to navigate those waters. That would be some bumpy tracks every now and then, I would think, if you didn't have the team
Correct.
and a dad that was on top of everything. That would be overwhelming for
Yes.
a lot of families.
Yes.
And a lot of kids.
Absolutely.
And it might change their game to the point of their head gets bigger than their bicep sometimes,
And
right?
absolutely. I mean, it would be very easy to get, sucked into that world.
Right.
But it's a tool, and it's a byproduct of you doing things
Putting in the work and being successful.
well, and right, and
being a good kid.
and setting yourself up for for success.
Yes, sir.
And so a lot of credit to Caden, for he's handled it extremely well. He's done all of his obligations. It's opened up other opportunities for him. So it's super cool.
Well, while we're on that, let's go ahead and give a shout out to his social media, because I'm sure he needs a few more social media fans. But let's shout out to all his social media, Coach, if you get a second.
Absolutely.
Tell the camera about Caden Borcherding, and let's get some more followers out there, guys.
Well, let's get on his, let's see, his Instagram is at Caden Borcherding 29.
At Caden Borcherding 29.
Yep.
That's Borcherding.
ERDING.
There you go.
His X is at Borcherding 29.
At Borcherding 29 on
Yep.
X and Twitter.
Yep.
Let's get out there and give him some follows. Let's build it up. Like I
Yeah.
said, I know he's got plenty, but let's get him some more out there, Coach. And we definitely appreciate you coming on and sharing this story with us. And
Absolutely.
we're looking forward to. First of all, let's bring home a state championship. Let's go step by step.
Priority one.
That's right, priority one. Let's do that, and then let's build for the future. And let's watch this kid develop and grow and prosper even more.
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful that you came in and shared this story
Well,
with me.
appreciate that. Thank
yeah,
you very
it's
much.
awesome. And this is a grassroots program. We want to hear about the trials, the tribulations, the successes of coaches, of athletes, of the parents. But we want other people to understand, if you have a top end athlete, maybe you got something out of this today. You got some advice, you got some information that maybe you didn't realize. Maybe it's not playing in the fall. Maybe it's getting more into the socials as a younger child and supporting that, because a lot of parents are anti-social media
Absolutely.
for younger kids. And so obviously that has helped him, propelled him, made him more money, made him
Right.
more opportunities through NIL things.
Right.
So you want to have some fun?
Always.
Let's do a little rapid fire, baby.
Let's go.
Let's do a little rapid fire, Coach. I'm gonna throw some questions out here. They may be silly, they may be dumb,
All right.
but I want you to fire out the first thing that comes to your mind. Here we go. Let me see. We're foodies on this thing, as you know. We like to eat. So imagine your favorite meal. We won't call it your last supper, but we'll call it your favorite meal, from dessert all the way to the appetizer, frontward, backwards. Who's cooking it? What is it?
I'm going to have to go with one of our big supporters for the Etowah program, Longhorn Steakhouse.
There you go.
The Gibson Long family, they provide us, they pay for this we get a Longhorn steak dinner every Thursday before our games.
Yes, sir.
Throughout the playoff run. And so
So what are you having?
6-ounce filet with the loaded mash, Caesar salad, and a sweet tea.
And a sweet tea. I like it. So, and again, Sawyer Gibson Long is a former Etowah kid that's
Correct.
in the major leagues right now as
Correct.
a pitcher, excelling in.
Dr. Lilly is a big supporter of our program, and we're very, 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 very fortunate to have them involved with our program.
Fantastic. So I know baseball is full of superstitions.
Yeah.
What kind of superstitions or rituals or things like that do you deal with on a regular basis on game day? Anything in particular that you do or that you did as a player?
Wear the same socks, wear the same underwear.
Yes, sir.
If I had a good, if he has a good game, he wears the same
Sure.
underwear.
Yeah.
Putting socks on the same way every time.
Right.
So, things like that.
Well, Coach, we've had like 7 or 8 great hits on this podcast, and I'm wearing the same pair of underwear that haven't been
There you
washed for the
go.
same 9 times.
There you go.
Just kidding, folks. I do wash my underwear occasionally, but that's when I have I can't say bad streak, but if I have a bad streak, right. I'll change. So, what about, what's the biggest venue that you've been a part of as a player, coach, with your son or through yourself playing? Biggest venue, biggest crowd, coolest environment that you've ever been a part of?
East Coast Pro.
Okay.
Hands down.
Yeah.
It's all draft picks, future draft picks. It's best baseball in the country at the amateur level.
Love it.
Hands down.
Love it. Well, you know this is called the Chapped A Podcast, right, Coach?
Yes, sir.
We are the Chapped A Podcast. So now I need you to tell me what chaps your ass.
Called strike threes.
That's right.
Looking.
Right. Don't take the backwards K.
No.
Golly, I
No.
feel you on that. I'm still coaching an 18U travel
Yes.
team, Coach, and I just tell them after every game, there's one thing that peeves. Do not take strike three. I don't care if it bounces. I don't care if it's over your head. Swing the bat. Don't let the umpire steal it from you, right?
Well, it's not. It's competitive.
Right.
You know. Get in there and fight. That's always my biggest thing. I don't care if you strike out.
Right.
Just compete in the box.
Right.
But if we're not swinging, we ain't competing.
That's right.
You know.
Well, as a fantasy dork, nothing good comes out of a taking strike three, right? I mean, if you at least put it in play, you put a little pressure on the defense,
Absolutely.
and that's what we've got to do there.
They gotta
Swing
do
the bat and just put the bat on the ball.
They got
Something
to
good can
field
happen.
it, throw it, and catch it.
That's right. They got to make 3 different plays to get you out there.
Correct.
That's awesome. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about Caden or yourself?
No, I just for parents, just understand that everybody's race is different.
Right.
And that kids developmentally they grow at different times, their clocks aren't all the same, and just understand. I had made the mistake very early on of applying too much pressure at times,
Right.
And don't fall into that your child's performance is a reflection on your parenting.
Right.
That separate that aspect of it as much as possible. And the best thing that you could do is just tell them after a game that you love watching them play.
Right.
The things that kill kids, and again, I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and I've made fair share of mistakes, but I've learned, through those mistakes, and that's the key. Things that ruin kids is the car ride home.
Right. So there's an old saying. Now I'm switching gears. I'm pulling this back out. But there's an old survey, and they interviewed 1,000 kids that played Division I, and they asked them what the worst thing about growing up was, and it was always the car ride home. However, shout out to you, Shaw. I'm going to give him a little prop here. But the thing that people don't realize in that sentence also is they interviewed 1,000 D1 athletes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little bit of that, but I have learned my lesson on that as my son growing up before
Right.
I got into coaching Cameron, is you definitely have to tamp that down on the ride home. And now, unless they bring it up, it's just a regular ride
Right.
home. And then, the 24-hour rule,
Right.
48-hour rule. Then
Right.
you can start discussing it when everybody's got a chance to exhale and
Correct.
breathe. So I think that is great advice right there,
Yeah,
Coach.
no,
and we
they're still
appreciate that.
processing the game themselves.
That's right. And they know what their faults were, what their issues were.
Absolutely, and they know whether they played well or didn't play. And ultimately, they want your approval.
Mm-hmm.
They want to make you proud.
Right.
And so, again, I haven't been perfect.
Right.
Through
I'm
that
sorry.
through that
Yes, sir.
process, but just it's every kid's path is going to be a little bit different.
Yes, sir.
And it will eventually work out the way that it's supposed to work
Mm-hmm.
out. And if you have questions, the key thing is get the questions answered by people that have the answers.
Mm-hmm.
That there are people that particularly with a lot of these recruiting services and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
guys, you don't have to spend
Right.
that money, when you are tied in with people that really know what's going on.
Right.
And I'll use this as an example. I had a kid that trains with Caden at Dojo. I'm not going to say names or any schools or
Yes, sir.
anything else like that, but hired one of the recruiting services, paid about $6,000 for the recruiting service. Now, granted, this is a kid that is a good player,
Mm-hmm.
under the radar,
Mm-hmm.
kind of didn't do some of the things, played with a team that wasn't one of the bigger programs, got kind of pushed to the side a little bit, and just didn't get the exposure that they needed. Kid was within probably 2 weeks of graduation and had nowhere to go.
And
So-
you spent $6,000 for recruiting.
Correct.
Yeah.
So,
Ouch.
and dad is a friend of mine. I'm like, hey, what's going on? Long story short, not a whole lot of traction right there. So I picked up the phone. I made a phone call. I knew that there was a school that was looking for a catcher. I knew that he would be a good fit. He could play at that level. Picked up the phone. Hey, you need to take a look at this kid. They went and watched him. Kid almost hit for the cycle. Threw 2 kids out. Ended up getting signed.
Bada bing, bada boom. That's awesome.
And within 2 weeks of his graduation, had nowhere to go. It took one phone call from somebody that knows,
right.
And so,
with a real recommendation, not some hype. You're telling them what you know
absolutely.
About this kid. Yeah. Personally
absolutely.
and athletically.
And particularly people that, obviously I'm putting my neck out for that
sure.
individual.
And those guys trust you, the coaches.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And that's the thing is that they'll trust the opinions of people
yes,
that,
sir.
That they trust. So, and they did.
Yes, sir.
And so now the kid's going to play Division I baseball.
That's outstanding. Love
but
that story.
But unfortunately, that's kind of how this thing goes.
Well, I was going to say, as a parent, I mean, sometimes you got to live and learn, right? You make
Correct.
Mistakes to get better,
Correct.
so that's part of the process as well.
And then don't allow people to prey on your
Right.
insecurity,
Right.
of it. It's the job of the travel programs is to help placement.
Right.
And making sure that when you make those decisions for your child and what organization they're going to play with, make sure it is a reputable organization that has a history of placing kids in positions.
Right.
And, that doesn't guarantee it, but those organizations are going to put themselves in the correct events
right.
to allow those kids to be seen. We had offers from multiple organizations for Caden to play, and I chose Team Elite because when I helped start Team Georgia back in 2006, Team Elite had just started. All the guys that are in the Team Elite program are still the same guys that are in the Team Elite program. There's
right.
not a ton of turnover, which tells me there's stability there.
Helps. Yes,
and
sir.
obviously their track record for getting kids to school, not to say that, East Cobb doesn't do the same thing. There's multiple, East Cobb does a great job. 643 does a great job, but it's some of the smaller organizations, smaller teams, that don't get those invites to those particular events
right.
that limit the exposure opportunities, for those kids and for the parents.
Yes, sir.
And so you're spending a lot of money,
right. Going everywhere.
You're seriously, you're spending a ton of money. And so, fortunate the money that I've spent, I don't have to pay for college.
Right.
I don't have to pay for it. And so,
and hopefully come MLB time, the draft time, it's going to pay off for Caden
correct.
as well.
And that's the thing too,
yes.
is that, it's, I invested the money into Maven because I knew in order for him to have a pro level swing by the time that it was necessary, that it was going to take time.
Yes, sir.
And that was a significant financial investment, there, but it was worth it. Go down and get an assessment from Maven, find out what exactly your child has in their particular swing. They do those assessments, and now you have a cheat code.
Right.
Now rather than somebody eyeballing it
right.
and telling you how great it looks and things like, now you have the data
right.
behind it that it will tell you exactly where the flaws are or what you do well in your swing. And now you can take that information and go course correct.
Right.
Versus just not knowing. You've got hard data that tells you exactly what you need to do.
Yes, sir.
And that helps the process so much quicker.
Right.
When you know exactly what you're trying to attack versus
right. He said this, he
right.
said that. Coach said
I
this,
see
Coach
this.
said that. Yeah.
Know that we've got force plates and data and information that tells you exactly, all right, we need to do this, this, and this.
Yes,
These
sir.
are the things that we need to do.
Right.
And so when you have that cheat code, it makes the progress so much quicker. And so, but it takes time.
Right.
Because now you're relearning all the neural things that you retraining
that
all
you've
the
already had the rule of 10,000 reps of.
Correct.
Yes.
And
now you got to redo.
Correct.
Now you got to get 10,000 more.
Correct.
Understood.
Correct.
Understood. Well, again, Coach, I want to say thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity.
go kick butt,
Yes,
bring
sir.
that Bird Gang home with the
Yes,
state
sir.
championship. We're looking forward to it. Let's go get
Yes.
let's go get North Paulding and show them what we got.
Yes, sir.
And
Thank you
then,
very much.
Let's have Caden have an outstanding senior season once he brings home the state championship, and maybe we can go back to back. That'd be amazing.
Yes, sir.
But again, I just want to say thank you for coming on and sharing your story. I know it's very personal, but it hits home for a lot of people. A lot of parents can relate to some of your stories. And as a dad and as a coach, it's just
Right.
amazing. So thank you very much for that. And I would just like to say shout out to the sponsors, shout out to anybody that's listening. Call to action, please follow us. Smash that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow us on Spotify. Follow us on all our socials at Chapped A Podcast, CHAPPEDA Podcast. Please give us a follow, a like, and a shout out. With special thanks to Brad and April with
Thank you,
Hardpan
guys.
Media.
Yeah.
With Hardpan Media, and special thanks to Andy Hollis at OBA Living down in Alabama. And I appreciate all the help. And let's look forward to bringing home a state championship with that Bird Gang, Coach. So proud of you guys. Go
Thank
get
you.
them.
Thank
Yes, sir.
you.
Thanks
Go,
for
go Eagles.
Go Eagles. Let's go. We out.